Hi, this is Glenn at Beaver Labs again. This is part two of a SketchUp tutorial. I'm going to first open up the test file that we created last time. Double clicking on that. Again, I'm using version 8, which is an old version of SketchUp, but the fundamentals are the same. And there it is. This is pretty much where we left it. We had that up. Quick review, here's the layers window. Shows that you've got two layers defined, layer 0 and circle. We've got the entity info. If I click on some entity, in this case a surface, it pops up and tells me that it's drawn on layer 0, in this case what the area is, and so forth. Sometimes it shows one side, sometimes it shows two sides. Um, so let's go through a little more systematically here with the camera. Standard views. This is orthogonal views. If I look at this as the top view, we're looking at it from the top. Hit the orbit by hitting the O key, hold down the left mouse, and then drag the mouse around to get the different views. Go back to camera, I'll hit the standard view bottom. I was looking at the other side. If I hold the shift key down, it changes to the hand. And then if I hold down the left mouse and drag it, I'm just panning around. That's a shortcut. Another way to get to that is camera where it says pan. So if I check the pan, now that hand appears, I get the same thing. I don't have to hold down the shift key, whichever one you find more comfortable. Now, with respect to the views, you've got perspective and you've got parallel view. They're both useful for different things. If I've got perspective view, it shows, the perspective. It looks like the actual model with the vanishing point and so forth. But sometimes if you line something up, you want to see what's right behind it, uh, and don't want that view. So if you go to the parallel projection, it gives you that. I don't seem to have a good view here of an example. Well, let's create one. And hit the R key, create a rectangle, hit the P key, and push that up. I've created this object. Now, if I want to, let's say, let's go to standard view front, and this is the object right here. If I've got a perspective view, and over here, now if you notice at the top there, it's going to vanishing point. This length is the same as that length, but because it's behind, it appears smaller. That's just how your eye normally sees things. But maybe you want to have the front and the back be exactly the same size. In that case, you go to the parallel projection. And now you'll notice that it doesn't go back to vanishing point. It stays the same. If you line up at the front there, the back is entirely hidden. It's exactly hidden. Both views are useful for different things. Again, if you hit the L, I can draw a line. If I hit the R, I can draw the rectangle. Hit the C and hit the circle. There is no um, shortcut normally, at least in my system, for polygons. So I'd go into the draw and hit the polygon. Now, it normally comes up with a six-sided figure. But if I click on that, actually, let's draw that again. Do the draw a polygon. And before I draw something, you see down in the corner here says 6. I can change that to 8. Return 4. Return. So there's 4 sides that appear there. Uh, uh, 10. Return. And until I do something else, like hold down the left mouse button to draw a polygon again, rotate it. If you count the sides there, you'll see 10 sides on that. So that's how you make different polygons with different number of sides. Okay, a couple of other things here. If I go to the Tools menu, there's this paint bucket, and again, here's all the shortcuts on the side. So if I hit the B key, I get to the paint bucket as well. And that's when this materials plot comes up, and here's some things that have been defined. I'll just click on this one. Now when I move this out, you can see a little paint bucket appear, and I can select a surface, let's say the end here, and I'll left mouse click, and now that material gets painted onto there. I can do it onto this piece or that piece. You'll notice it didn't get this piece because that's defined as a different surface. I can click a different one here and get that. That's how the material works. I don't use that terribly often. There's another way of defining colors. If I select a surface here and see this entity info comes up, if I double click on one of those faces, you can choose a paint surface or define your own. So if I choose, say, that one, okay, now that surface is taken on that color. Let me click on this end piece and hit the delete key to kill that. Hit the O for orbit, go around here. You see the other side here is a different color than this one. And that's because we've only defined the one. Now if I double click on this one and select, oh, let's say this color because it's so different. Okay. Hit the O for orbit. You see that side is red, this side is different, dark charcoal color in this case. Sidedness matters in 3D models. You'll have a thing called uh, create an STL file, which is a series of triangles that define a surface. And you might end up with one with flipped triangles. And that means that you've got everything on the outside is maybe the the same defined as I'll call it side one. Maybe it's this charcoal, and side two would be the red, and maybe on one of these pieces you've got red on the outside. It's called a flipped triangle, and that matters. So there's ways within STL tools of flipping those back so that all the outside appears on the outside. Um, Tape measure. That's a good one. Go to Tools and see the tape measure or T, which is what I typically use. This little tape measure thing appears. So you can left click at some point and then drag it to some other point. I haven't hit another button, but I can see the diagonally opposite is 0.571 inches. To there is 0.454. To over to there is 0.832 inches. If I left click that again, this guideline pops in. You often end up with a drawing just chock full of these guidelines, which are sometimes useful as a pseudo line to measure things or draw things to. But after a while, when you get enough of those things, it can be irritating, and you want to get rid of them. The way to do that is you go over here to Edit, Delete Guides. Bam! All the those guidelines are gone. Or you can delete them individually. I can just select that line and hit the delete key and it's gone. But usually I want to get rid of all of them. Another useful thing is rotating. Well, first of all, let me recreate this place on here by drawing a line and deleting that. So if I go up here to this thing here is a rotation symbol, which is what I typically use. But you can also get to that from Tools, um, Rotate, or hit the Q key. So it's three different ways of doing it. So I'm going to hit this, and you'll notice I've got this little protractor that it pops up. It's showing blue right now because it's lined up on the blue axis. So this face is green because it lines up orthogonal to the green axis. If I go over here, it turns red because it's orthogonal to the red axis. But suppose you want to move it someplace else and keep that orientation. If I hold down the Shift key, once I get an orientation I want, if I hold down the Shift key, now when I move this, it stays green. As soon as I release it, it'll revert to the closest thing. Hold down the Shift key, now it stays blue. So that's kind of handy to know. Let me do an example by making another one of these cylinders here, structures. And I'll do that by selecting that and say make group. Now if I hit the Q for the rotate, hold down the Shift key, go down here, and then rotate clockwise by some arbitrary. I can see in the bottom right-hand corner, it tells you how many degrees it is. This happens to be 90. But it doesn't matter. I just start moving it in the direction I want, and then I left click and then type in the exact number of degrees I want. So it's been rotated by 90 degrees in the orthogonal to the green axis direction. So that's how rotations are done. While we're on the subject up here, you can see a number of other things. Here's the pan that we did by moving the whole view. Zoom, which you can do by either moving in and out, or just moving the magnifying glass from the center toward the edge and back, or using the center key of a mouse, which is the easiest way if you're actually using a mouse. And I have the orbit so that rotates the view, doesn't rotate the parts, it rotates the view. And again, the Control Z gets you out of a lot of trouble. It's just sequentially goes back and deletes all the last stuff that you did. Okay, that's just about enough for now, but let me leave you with one other piece of advice. Always draw on the axis and then rotate things to where you want them to be. It just makes things easier. It's a lot easier to line things on the axes and then rotate them. When you get into making components, that has a different layer of rotations, which can be a little bit confusing. But all these things were really drawn along axes. Now we get to these things here. This was an axis, long axis. That was long axis, and I've drawn some angles from that. That's different than um, making your base system off axis in the first place. Okay, I can close this. I'm not going to save this. I'm just going to exit either by this or by this X up here. You're going to ask me, do I want to save the changes because it recognizes that I have made changes? I'm going to say no. Okay, see you later.